Director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Mr. Fakir Hassen, Ms. Aradhna Ramballi, Mr. Sikiram Chunu, Mr. Piyush Khandelwal, distinguished guests, online viewers, namaskar and welcome to the 13th episode of Bharat Ek Anubhuti, India a Feeling. Bharat Ek Anubhuti is an online travelogue series. Indeed, today in our midst we have two very dynamic members of the diaspora joining us to share their memoirs, experiences and journey on incredible India with us. To begin our program today, I would like to invite our first guest speaker, and that's Ms. Aradhna Ramballi ji. Aradhna ji is a news presenter at the Hindwani radio station and a Hindi scholar. Namaste and welcome, Aradhna ji, for your remarks today on the 13th episode of Bharat Ek Anubhuti.
सभी को नमस्ते मैं हूँ आराधना रामबली I am a Hindi news reader at Radio Hindwani here in South Africa. So I'm going to be telling you about my extensive travels in India on Bharat Ek Anubhuti. So I had the privilege of studying a diploma in Hindi at the Kendriya Hindi Sansthan in Agra in India between September 2017 and April 2018. That was approximately 8 months. So I was very privileged that I got to travel extensively in that time. In the sense that we were students, so we didn't have much money to spend on expensive hotels. So it was a better experience for us because we got to experience a real India. From the time I was young, I've always had a soft spot for India because we've always been taught that India is our motherland, and it makes sense because the language that we speak, the food that we eat, the songs that we sing, the clothes that we wear, we all, look to India for inspiration in those aspects, and of course the culture, the religion that we practice here in South Africa as Hindus. All of that we get from India. So for that reason and many other reasons, I've always wanted to travel India. So our ancestors came to South Africa from India, and being in India for that time, I could imagine the hardships that our forefathers had to undergo to leave their motherland and come to an unknown land to sort of build a better life for themselves and for the upcoming generations, and to set up a better life, for us and for generations going forward. I think the best thing about being in India for so long is that we got to travel extensively, for different festivals, be it for Ram Navami, not Ram Navami, for Diwali, we actually went to Ayodhya, and that was surreal for me because we've always read about the Ramayana. We went on a field trip to Prem Mandir, that is Vrindavan and Mathura. And in terms of festivals, we celebrated Shivratri in India. We did Ram Navami, Navaratri, where I got to witness for the very first time Ram Leela, where you had the statue of Ravan, and the Sri Ram actually shoots an arrow of fire, and that was a surreal experience for me because I've always seen it in movies, never in real life. So that was one of the experiences that really stands out for me. The other experience would be celebrating Holi in Mathura and Vrindavan. The fun aspect is always there, even here in South Africa, but being in India celebrating Holi extensively with the people of Vrindavan and Mathura. And when I say it was crazy, I mean there's colored water, shooting from every direction. Even if you're going in the auto, in the street, there's people throwing colored water on you from the roofs of their houses. So it was absolutely crazy. And on that day, we didn't realize that we were living probably one of the best days of our lives. And if you speak to any of my friends that were with me on that day, they will tell you the same thing. So speaking of friends, I've got to meet a very interesting group of people who are now some of my best friends from all over the world. So the structure of classes at the Kendriya Hindi Sansthan, there's EXO, DOSO, TeenSo, and CharSo. The EXO being the basic and the CharSo being advanced. So I was in the DOSO class, and my classmates consisted of people from Egypt, people from Bangladesh, Poland, Russia, Sri Lanka. So one of the best experiences was actually interacting with all of these people, meeting them, learning, their way of life, their culture, their language, because okay, we all had a common language that was Hindi because not everybody had a strong command of English. So to communicate, we had to speak in Hindi. But when they were talking amongst themselves, people from the same country, they would use their own language. And because of that, we also learned some of their language as well. So, learning a language comes with a lot of, I wouldn't say experience, but it comes with a lot of patience, because you're not only learning a language, you're learning everything about the language, the background of the language. And for this, for their patience, I would like to thank my gurujis in India. We had to learn the fundamentals of the Hindi language, the literature, um, things that you would not necessarily learn here in South Africa because they go into much more detail. So I'd like to thank my gurujis in India for that, for teaching us the fundamentals, and of course being so patient with us and encouraging us to learn the language. In terms of what the craze is in India, obviously one is Bollywood, and because I've grown up watching Hindi movies, we've had this certain sort of view of India through Bollywood, and which is not necessarily the true India. Um, but for that is one of the reasons as well that I wanted to visit India, because I'm a huge Shah Rukh Khan fan, and you wouldn't believe this, but me and a few of my friends, all of them girls, we traveled 27 hours in a train one way to go to Mumbai to visit Mannat on the 2nd of November, which is when Shah Rukh Khan comes out to greet all of his fans. And I kid you not, there were about 5,000-6,000 people there at like 8 o'clock in the morning. And from that experience, we met a whole lot of other Shah Rukh Khan fans from all over the world. I remember one stands out. We met this girl from Japan who says every year she comes to Mannat just to see Shah Rukh Khan. So there are definitely more crazier fans than us out there. But speaking of crazy, one of the things that we did on that trip, besides go to Shah Rukh Khan's house like stalkers, we actually went to watch the movie Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge at the Maratha cinema, where it was originally released in the year 1995. And that was a surreal experience for me as well, because that movie has been running in India since 1995 non-stop. So enough about Bollywood. Another craze in India is actually cricket, and coming from South Africa, we also a cricket mad country. I was very privileged that again a few of my friends and I went to an IPL match in India. We went for the Mumbai versus Rajasthan Royals. Unfortunately, we were Mumbai fans sitting in the Rajasthan Royal Stadium, so there must have been roughly about 50 Mumbai Indians fans compared to like 5,000-6,000 Rajasthan Royals fans sitting there. And we were basically in the enemy ground, but it was an experience that you had to be there to experience, especially if you are a cricket lover. India, as we all know, is a cricket mad country, so you can just imagine the drama that was there and unfortunately Mumbai lost the match. So the home side won, and yeah, it was an amazing experience just being there to experience that. But one of the best parts about being on this program is meeting so many people from different cultures. And I did say earlier that Hindi was our common language, so we had to use it to communicate. But I think speaking Hindi in India through the auto wale bhaiya and the sabzi wale bhaiya, and um, speaking with the common people on the ground, it contributed to improving our Hindi grammar, our Hindi vocabulary. And because everybody is doing it, you actually you get used to it, and you are forced to speak the language with those people. So I think that was the best part. To be able to learn Hindi, I think the best way is to really speak it. So the more you speak it, the more you get used to it, and the more your grammar gets corrected automatically. So that was something about my India travels. And oh yes, the other thing is, I did say to travel to get the real experience of India, local transport is the best, no matter how long it takes you to get to your destination. We went on a field trip to South India, and it took us 2 days to get from Agra to Chennai, but it was totally worth it because the food on the train was delicious. The 10 rupees chai was the best I've ever had in my life. So going simple is, I think, probably the best way, and that's where you learn more about India. And yeah, that was pretty much my travels in India. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this program. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Aradhna ji. Wow, what beautiful memories and experiences you've shared with us today. Up next, we have a beautiful presentation on India. We will be screening a dynamic video on Incredible India now. So sit back, relax as we take you on an incredible journey through India.
From the ancient times of Sangam literature, Tamils have been keenly aware of the ecosystem around them, which they distinctly divided into 5 different terrains: Kurinji or mountains, Mulai or forests, Marudam or plains, Neithal or seashores, and Palai or drylands. Today, Tamil Nadu is indeed a fine example of development in partnership with Mother Nature. Forests and settlements, resonating with symphonies of sights and sounds, orchestrated by Mother Nature herself. Sensitization of the masses to environmental preservation has been a top priority, and the resulting benefits are there for everyone to see. Boat houses in serene settings in Tamil Nadu are a major tourist attraction. An abundance of flora and fauna ensures conservation of not just the lakes, but also their surroundings. The Pichavaram mangrove forest, one of the largest of its kind in the world, is one of the finest examples of exquisite scenic beauty, sheltering animals and birds in a natural habitat. The intricate root system of mangroves makes these forests attractive to fish and other organisms seeking food. The Agastya Malai Biosphere Reserve and the Gulf of Mannar Biosphere are fine examples of the commitment of the state towards our ecosystem. Away from the hustle and bustle of the city, waterfalls in Tamil Nadu are on the priority list of tourists. rejuvenating for visitors, and having a major impact on the ecosystem as well as ensuring economic prosperity of the local population. A popular local saying aptly encapsulates this novel sentiment. Leave only your footprints behind, not the litter.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. Our next guest speaker needs no introduction as well, and that is Mr. Fakir Hassen ji, who will be sharing his experiences with us. Just a brief background about Fakir ji. Fakir Hassen has been involved in the education, broadcasting and journalism industries for the past 47 years in various capacities. After teaching for 4 years at the Bree Street Primary School in Fortsburg, Johannesburg, Fakir ji has worked for over several print media and for another 4 years. He started full-time work at the South African Broadcasting Corporation (SABC) as the chief sub-editor in the radio news division in 1982. He went on head the full-time service to the South African Indian listeners Radio Lotus, where he was the station manager for a decade before being tasked to start up the first educational radio services for the corporation. Indeed, namaste and welcome Fakir ji today on this 13th episode of Bharat Ek Anubhuti for your remarks.
Namaste, Shrishti, and thank you very much. And I believe Dr. Yogi is also listening very keenly and watching, and so is Piyush and Spiwe, and of course, our good friend, Dr. Savde. Like you saw in that video, there couldn't be a better description of India, you know, this kind of cliche about it being a world in one country. Very, very true. And I've been very privileged and fortunate in probably more than 20 visits over the last 3 decades. Even when we South Africans were not allowed to go there, you know, there was this thing which I must explain for, I'm sure many people, a younger generation don't know this. But in those days, when you were South African in the apartheid regime, if you were of Indian origin, you could visit India. But I have 3 passports now. But that first passport that I had in the 80s doesn't show anything about me being in India. In those days, how it worked was, you got a small strip of paper from what was then called in South Africa the Department of Indian Affairs. They had actually had a ministry for every race group in South Africa. And you had no choice. You went, you applied, you waited patiently. Sometimes they gave it to you, sometimes they didn't. They want to know your father was in the resistance, so why do you want to go to India and so on. But fortunately, I managed to get one. And in the end, I ended up in India, literally kind of underground, if you'll have it that way, because legally, you were not allowed to be in India. India had a ban on anything from South Africa, and Pakistan had. You know, Pakistan, it goes through the various stages. Then it's okay, then it's not. But at that stage, the 2 countries that were banned for you know, Indians to visit was Pakistan and South Africa. And this started way back in 1947, as the historians will tell you, when South Africa led the fight at the UN against apartheid. They were the first to lead it, the global fight. So one understands there was a cultural boycott. So you couldn't get anything into South Africa, supposedly, that was of Indian origin. But we got everything, from the rice and the masalas right down to the music. We got it, you know, illegally, if you will, that way, with middlemen making a lot of money via Singapore and Mauritius and Dubai and such places. So we were not left behind. We knew what the latest movies were, we knew who the latest singers were, etc. But we didn't see them live because they couldn't come here. If the Indian government found out that they were here, they were in serious trouble. So anyway, so there I was somewhere in the early 80s, landing in Chennai, at that time called Madras, of course. And I was on a mission, actually. I went through the entire country, again, literally underground, but I was very welcomed. In fact, many places I was actually asked to speak to people about what is it like being an Indian in South Africa, you know. And my grandfather had arrived in 1903. My father was born and died in Pretoria. He never left the country. And I was the first in the 3 generations now to go back to India. So it was very interesting for me to go to India, but also the Indians were finding it fascinating to find an Indian from South Africa here. So in Chennai, my mission then was, as you mentioned earlier, Shrishti, I was heading up Radio Lotus at that time. Now, in those days, we got only cassettes. CDs were yet to come and so on. LPs and cassettes is what we used to play in the 5 Indian languages. And we had a huge problem getting the latest music for the station. So my mission was go to India, go and buy these LPs and come back with them. Because at that time, the exchange rate was something like 16 or 17 rupees to a rand. So it was like nothing. Go and see if you can get these records. So soon after landing in Chennai, I head off to one of the biggest music dealers there because Tamil music was a particular problem in South Africa. So here I was trying to find Tamil music, Tamil LPs. So I walk into the shop, the biggest music dealer. At that time, LPs were the in thing, LPs and cassettes. And I walk in and I find wall-to-wall LPs in Tamil and Telugu mainly, and of course some Hindi. So I tell the salesman, can you pack one of each for me, please? And he looks at me like, this man, some pagal aadmi came in here. He says, huh? I said, please pack me one of each. He says, sir, there are more than 300 LPs here. You want all? I said, yes, I'd like one of each. And he first wanted to see my money. So I showed him I can't pay for it. And then he calls his boss from upstairs. So I explained to his boss, I'm heading up a radio station in South Africa. We play this music and I need this music over there. Instantly he called for, kursi lao bhai, kursi lao, bring a chair, sit down, kya piyenge aap? Garam, thanda, arrange for the Pepsi I requested. In fact, during the course of that hour, he got me about 4 Pepsis, which I couldn't finish. And then I explained to him, no, and I really need these LPs. Now, remember, I was literally underground. Now, it's quite innocent at that time, if I can call it that, about how to ship the stuff back to India or back to South Africa from India. And that was another challenge that almost got me arrested. Because very happily, they packed it for me. The next day, delivered it to my hotel, 2 big bags full, nicely packed to go back to South Africa. They never told me a word about India doesn't allow exports to South Africa. So there I was now with these bags of music, and I trot off to the post office in a taxi. And at the post office, I almost got arrested for trying to send goods from India to South Africa. Anyway, it's a very long story about how I eventually got it out, and the time is limited. But in the end, 6 months later, those 2 bags arrived at Radio Lotus in Durban, stamped Mauritius, Switzerland, London, and then landed in Durban. All intact, all safe. On the top of the bags were my dirty clothing and techies and so on, which is a long story. That was the only way we could get it out via Thomas Cook as unaccompanied baggage. Now, since that time, I've been there many, many times, and things have changed so much, and not even to mention the technology. In those days, you book a call back home, and it was those black little telephones Srishti made before you were born. And you book a call with an operator, and you sit in that hotel room from 6 o'clock to 1 o'clock. And if you're lucky, at 1 o'clock, you get that call through. And it happened to me only twice that I managed to get a call through. These days, then I saw the era of PCOs. You'll remember, Dr. Yogi, PCOs and ISDs when you could call directly much more easily. And these days, you just lift your cell phone and WhatsApp, and back home, you watch everybody, so you don't feel homesick or anything. So technologically, I've been privileged to watch the progress of India. From a tourism point of view, of course, on that mission, I went to Hyderabad. I coupled it obviously with tourism because I was there for the first time. The Taj Mahal, imposing as it was, I went back so many other times. But if I tell you that the Taj is now not my favorite place in India anymore, after seeing it so many times, it was then. But since then, I've been to Kashmir on a houseboat, which was a wonderful experience. I've been to Calcutta and watched things there, that you wouldn't see otherwise, cricket, etc. I've seen the pink city of Jaipur. And then more recently, in the last few years, I've been down to deep northeast India into the jungles, which was an amazing experience. Myself and a Japanese media colleague, we were part of a media contingent that this so-called 6 sisters, or is it 7 sisters now, Dr. Yogi, those northern states of India, very pristine, You could literally sleep in a tiger reserve overnight. And I wasn't scared of those mosquitoes. I was more scared of the tigers, but we didn't see a single tiger. Apparently, they don't come near those camps. But that was one of those experiences. Then I went to trace my roots in Surat, in the Gujarat state, to find out, since my grandfather had left, nobody had been back to trace our roots. And I managed to find out that I had a maternal uncle still left. And I traced him and I found him. And in whatever knowledge I had from my grandparents and so on, was that my grandfather had left behind a huge dairy farm in this village in Asna in Gujarat. So here I was, because I was led to believe that my father, as the eldest son, would have inherited that. And me, as my father's eldest son, I would now be the proud owner of a dairy farm in Surat. And off I went to look for my dairy farm. The closest I came to the dairy farm was my uncle, who was now in his 80s, living in a little cow dung hut, growing cucumbers to survive with his sixth wife and other children. So it was a humbling experience, to see that sort of thing. I went back a couple of times more with my wife as well. My wife, she says, we still want to go back home to South Africa. India is nice to tour, but we want to go back home. Then at a professional level, I also ended up going to Bangalore recently, where the High Commissioner took a media contingent from South Africa to watch the technological growth. I had been in Bangalore many times earlier, and it must have been a gap of about 15 years. I couldn't believe what had happened there with the technology that has grown there and how they become world leaders. Aerospace, you name it, almost anything from flight to space and under the water, in marine, everything. And we were privileged to be taken to some of these sites. We were also there in the year of Gandhi's 150th centenary. So to see all those celebrations going on all across the country was great. But then we ended up with President Cyril Ramaphosa being the chief guest at Republic Day in that year. And to see that pomp and glamour of Republic Day in January is something that I think everyone should try to experience just once. We were fortunate to be sitting in kind of a front row because we were media, so we were getting a little special treatment. But to see the pomp and pageantry and the passion of the people to see Republic Day. And I came back and I wrote a book about it, just like I did on a book on Northeast India. So 2 of my books around that. I've written 2 books on Gandhiji and all his sites in connection to South Africa. So there's so much in India. This 15 minutes is too little to talk about all those experiences. It became very much easier, when Air India and SAA had direct flights to Mumbai, which of course is gone, but I believe there's discussions on now to revive that. I hope it does happen, because I think a lot of people are a little deterred, besides the fact that we now have this COVID problem. But besides that, people who would want to visit India either for tourism, whether religious or medical, and I've seen a lot of those. A lot of people who went there for, especially in the south. I've been with some of my friends to the temples over there, how magnificent they are. I've been to other places. I've been on medical tourism. I was in Kerala with my wife, where we went to a beautiful island where we got this fantastic treatment. In fact, I don't know if you're going to see this post. I must show you the same boat. Dr. Yogi, I'm sure you recognize it. These are the houseboats on all the waterways around Kerala. And this is one of our prized displays now. Even the Taj Mahal is there, but this thing takes bigger pride of place than the Taj Mahal for the experience we had in Kerala. And so, yeah, I think I should start stopping now. You asked earlier, Shrishti, offline about my Bollywood experiences. Lots of them, lots and lots. In India, being involved with the Pravasi, I shared a platform with such luminaries as Yash Chopra and Kamal Hassan and Shabana Azmi. And imagine me, a young journalist, being with them on the same platform. It was something unforgettable. I went with one of my colleagues from Lotus, Jaguti JJ Mathura. We went to visit Rajnikant in his house in Madras. And I met Kamal Hassan at a temple where he was shooting for a film. The humility of the South Indian actors, which even Amitabh Bachchan has acknowledged, the humility and the punctuality is something that the North needs to learn a lot about, because in the North, no respect for time. I'll give you one quick experience. One day at 2 o'clock in the morning, I got a call from Gulshan Kumar. You will remember Gulshan Kumar was the man who revolutionized the music industry. From being a fruit and vegetable seller on the street, he started creating cassettes and CDs and popularized it and lowered the cost. And we became a close friend. Unfortunately, he was assassinated, as you know, by gangsters. But one day, 2 o'clock in the morning, he sent a driver to fetch me from the hotel. You got to come right now. I thought it's some kind of emergency, and he takes me to his studios there in Mumbai. He says, listen to this. I know you love this. And there he shows me the rough cuts, like the editing you were talking about earlier, Shrishti. The rough cuts of him miming some bhajans. There was probably some very well-known singer singing it in the background, but he was miming these bhajans. And Anuradha Podwal, who was so famous at that time, was one of his favorite singers there. And they were doing these beautiful bhajans. And he said to me, I'm going to send you the first CD as soon as I cut it. And he did. He really did. And it also takes pride of place in my music collection here. But like that, lots of other experiences, Bollywood shows in India, the award shows, and so on. So I guess my time is running out, so I can talk forever on India. But my message would be, go and visit yourself. Whatever you want to see, you're going to find in India. Whether you've been to the Kruger National Park in South Africa, you're going to see unique animals in India, in those reserves that you have there. I believe, I've never been myself, but I believe you can even go skiing in India. There's places where you could probably go and undertake the winter sports there. It's really that world in one country. And don't be put off by people who tell you about the street food is bad, etc. I've had street food. It's some of the best that I've ever had anyway. Of course, you've got to be careful, no doubt about that. You don't just eat anything anyway, but you watch and there are things you can do there. Go to the markets on the streets. I mean, the tourist guides will want to take you to the emporiums. Go by all means. But if you want to buy those expensive saris and things, that's the only place you're going to get it. But go to the markets on the streets, meet the people, and those experiences will stay with you forever in your life. Go and bargain with some of them. My wife always tells me, stop it now, because I'll bargain with the guys and eventually get them to agree to half the price, and then I'll still pay them the original price, because the original price they wanted was already far less than I had expected to pay. But the fun of the bargaining on both sides, I must tell you, those guys enjoy bargaining with you as well. So simple things like that are what you can thoroughly enjoy in India. And if you want more advice, I'm available to consult or to accompany you, but I won't fit in your bag the size I am. You'll have to pay for my ticket. Thanks for this opportunity. I hope I have done enough. If there are any questions, I'll be extremely glad to answer.
Thank you so much, Fakirji, for taking us down memory lane. Indeed, wow, what beautiful experiences you've shared with us. Definitely etched deep into our hearts and minds. Thank you so much for taking our time from your busy schedule and joining us today. With that, we've come to the close of episode 13 of Bharat Ek Anubhuti, India a Feeling. I would like to welcome Mr. Superior Mchunu from the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban to render this evening's vote of thanks.
Namaskar, greetings to all of you. On behalf of Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, I am honored today to deliver a vote of thanks on 13th episode of the program India a Feeling. This is an online travelogue series. Allow me to thank our online guests who took part on today's program, Mr. Fakir Hassen, a veteran journalist and an author, and Ms. Aradhna Ramballi, a radio presenter. This evening, they shared the wonderful experiences that they had in India, and whatever they shared with us this evening, it was really touching, and it was only about the India that we know. To Fakirji and Aradhnaji, Danyapat for sharing these wonderful stories with us. To Director of Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Srishti Harinarayan, Sri Piyush Kandelwal, Danyavat again for taking part on today's program. To all our online participants, I like to say thank you for taking part on today's program. You are kindly advised to visit the ICCR Devon Facebook page for all updates about the cultural activities organized by Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center in Devon. Once again, to Fakirji and Aradhna ji, thank you for what you have done this evening. To all of you, have a wonderful evening. Namaskar.